Hi farmers, I'm Gary and we're sitting with Minister Willie Oukamp. Minister, thanks for taking the time to have a conversation with us.
It's nice to have you guys here, and it's long overdue. It's been a very busy month and 8 days now, so yeah, I'm looking forward to speak to you and your viewers.
Yeah. So, Minister, I think let's jump right in. There have been a couple of as you've entered, there have been quite a couple of infrastructural challenges, trade challenges, disease challenges. What is taking priority at this point in time, and what do you foresee being resolved or addressed within the next 12 months?
Gary, the first thing that I had to deal with when I entered this office was this whole foot and mouth disease outbreak. I mean, it's all over the place. Everybody in this country knows that was the pressing point for agriculture that needs to be sorted out. And I think we have come to an agreement with the private sector, with all the role players and stakeholders, that collectively we can take this on. And I'm very glad that we could get to a point where a settlement was reached in the court case that was looming, but that we also now see the rollout. So FMD, biosecurity measures, strengthening that and getting a plan in place so that we can really take on foot and mouth disease is one of my highest priorities. And I think we are working on that on a daily basis. We can talk later on about the successes of what we are seeing on a practical level. The other thing that's a priority for me, and let me just interrupt myself, FMD is not the whole department. We must realize that there's much more than only FMD, although that is a very pressing matter. But in the department itself, we've got a lot of administrative bottlenecks. We see that with Act 36 applications. We see that with under the subdivision applications. And we need to streamline our administrative functions within this department. We cannot have people waiting for months and in some instances years to present products in the market that can help agriculture. So we definitely need to look at how we can really improve on how we function in that regard. And then a very important thing for me is operational partnerships. When we handled this foot and mouth disease issue, I put emphasis on the fact that government on its own cannot do this. We cannot be successful if we act on our own. But just as much, no agricultural organization or farmers organization or farmer individually will be able to sort FMD and many other problems out on their own. We need to work together. We are one team in agriculture. So I'm looking at really strengthening collaboration between all the various role players. If that collaboration is there and commitment, especially from government side, that we will change where we are lacking behind, then I really think the next 12 months and the period after that will be much better. We will much easier sort out our bottlenecks if we understand what the industry's requirements are. But also if the industry understand what the challenges are that we are facing. We've got systems in the department that needs to be remodeled. We need to, inside the department, also work with innovation and technology. And we are lacking behind in a lot of those instances. We've got to remodel it, and I'm looking forward to implementing this, because I really think that it can help us in the department to be in a much better position to be of service to the farmers out there.
So that's a very broad statement. When you say that there are processes and systems that need to be implemented, what are we looking at in the next 3 months? What are your immediate action points and the items that you're focusing on immediate deliverables? And then how do you see that rolling out in the next 12 months?
Well, Gary, as I said, we've got systems that are very old age. We've got to bring in technology. We've got to up our IT systems. We've got problems in the department with something as basic as IT systems. You get a submission and it still comes to you it's typed in, but it's not online. So it takes time to take it from one person to the next. We need to see that we really get things done in a quicker way. I think it is unacceptable that somebody applies via Act 36 to, let's say, for example, put a certain cattle feed in the market. But it takes years to get that approved. We need to make sure that things like that happens quicker. We also need to see, especially with collaboration between the department and the private sector and agricultural organizations, that we get to a point where we meet each other more frequently, that it's not only a matter of hearing what's been said and implement what we want to do in any case. We must listen and implement things collectively. Government cannot implement things on our own. We are there to put in the regulatory framework in which the whole industry must help us to implement that to the benefit of the industry itself. Let me give you an example, and we will speak about this. We've got the Ministerial Task Team on Foot and Mouth Disease, and we've got the Industry Coordinating Council. It is important for the Minister to be involved in that, and for the department to be there, so that we can hear and feel and understand what the frustrations are, what the challenges are, and collectively come up with plans. So you'll hear me speak a lot about collective decision making and taking everybody on board, because it's without that it will not succeed. But challenges in the department that needs to be corrected very soon is the systems that are in place to make decision making quicker.
So inherently and traditionally, these processes, like you said yourself, have taken really long to turn and to be implemented. Is this an open invitation to welcome those reputable organizations that want to get involved in upgrading the systems to come and have a conversation with you?
Absolutely.
And then similarly, you also mentioned that you welcome the conversation with all of the organized agricultural bodies and unorganized agricultural bodies, if there's such a thing, to come and have a similar conversation with you about their immediate pressure points. How do you, in volume, because that's a great volume, where would the priorities lie at this point in time for you? How are you going to filter what needs to be addressed yesterday, tomorrow, and next week?
I have already met with all the big agricultural organizations, Agri-SA, TLU, AFASA, SAI, the Milk Producers Organization, the ICC, and the MTT. So, Grain SA, which are the biggest role players in industry. And we have discussed the problem areas that they've got. And in a lot of instances, a lot of those problem areas are overlapping. So we've got a very good idea of where the frustrations lie. Each individual organization obviously have got their own specific things that are bothering them and things that they would like to see improved. But we will start to concentrate on getting the basics right. If you've got the basics right, you will have sorted out a lot of the problems that most of these organizations have got. So we will concentrate on that. And then obviously when it comes to specific industry issues, let's take for example Grain SA and the whole issue on tariff on grain. We are producing a very high quality grain, which must then compete against a lower quality grain, but we've got a cap on the price. It's just not right. You cannot compare something that's of a certain standard with something of a lower standard and then have to adjust your price and you've got no say in that. So we've got to look at sector specific issues and tackle those. But as I said, there are a lot of overlapping that we need to do.
Yes.
Let me give you an overlapping issue that's been discussed by everybody that I met with, is the issue of farm safety in our rural areas. It's not only a TLU or a Agri-SA thing, it's all over that is experienced. From the department side, we will collectively get everybody together and start working on what are we going to do, our implementation plan to get that right, to put pressure on other departments to, for example, classify rural safety and farm murders, farm attacks, stock theft as a priority crime. One murder is one murder too many. But if you go and look at the number of farmers, the number of farm murders, farm attacks, the brutality that goes along with that, we need to address that. And that is one of those collective things that we can definitely take on as a whole agricultural unit.
Sure. But then government has had the reputation and has the reputation of not only being the policy holder, but lacking in consistently implementing policy. How do you hope to address that in agriculture?
Gary,
and specifically when it comes to connecting, because farm safety connects to other departments. How are you hoping to bridge the gap?
Talk is cheap, money buys the whiskey. That's an old saying that is so true here. We've been talking about farm safety many times in this country. Before I became a minister 2 years ago, we in the department, in the portfolio committee, had a farm safety report that we did. And in that report, for the first time, Parliament admitted that farm murders is a reality. They admitted that the brutality that goes along with farm murders and farm attacks are out of proportion. It should not happen. So those things are there. But now we must start to implement this. I've already had a discussion, informally though, with the Acting Minister of Police, Professor Kachalia, and we need to make sure that this is made a priority. I will have discussions with the President on this as well when I see him in my next report back session to him. I think we really have got to a point where we've got to declare this as a priority crime. The moment that that is done, more resources can be put into preventative measures in our rural areas, better investigation, maybe also something like a specialized court that can handle the prosecution of people that's been involved in this. So we can talk and talk and talk about this, but we must now start to implement those measures that will be able to be measured on ground level to see what the improvements are that those measures led to.
Sure. So just so I can understand, you're saying that you are going to keep pushing on the example of farm safety until it gets recognized as a point of crisis so that it can be addressed from the top down correctly as a priority.
That's from a broader perspective. Yes. We will keep on doing that. We will not relent in doing that. But in the same time, whilst we are putting pressure on other departments to also come and assist with that, we must accept our responsibility as well. Just as with biosecurity, farm safety starts at the farm. We must make sure that our farmers know what they must do to protect themselves and their workers and their bigger community there at large. Become involved with your farm watches, with your safety communities, so that if there's a problem, there can be quick reaction to that, but so that you are prepared. So we've got to work together to make sure all those things are implemented, and that will lead to success.
And when you say we've got to work together, that's Department of Agriculture, Department of Police Department, as well as organized agriculture.
Absolutely. Everybody needs to come on board. It's a matter of, if all hands work together, we will be able to lift this rock. We cannot expect from our farmers to farm, to put food on our tables, but we as government and as industry and as organized agriculture are not doing everything in our power to make sure that they do it in a safe way. I know how it feels to be on the farm and to go away. Maybe you know that you're coming back a little bit later tonight and you do not know whether your family will be perfectly safe there. It's not nice. We must make sure that we improve our infrastructure of roads in rural areas. We can't expect police to be on the scene quickly or to do preventative visible policing work if the road that they must travel is not a proper road that they can travel on. It's things like that, a lot of small things that come together to form a bigger picture that we've got to address.
So, Minister, let's talk about foot and mouth. You've now, with recent decisions and changes, there are now multiple streams of vaccines coming into the country in various formats. What responsibility and role is government and the department specifically playing in the rollout to the informal livestock market? And who's responsible for those plans?
Okay. Gary, it's very important that we look at the shortcomings that government had. On our own, we could not have handled this. So we knew that we had to bring in the private sector, which we have now done. I'm very glad to say that in the last week, there were 2 million vaccines that arrived. 1 million government took, and that will bring me to answer your question now. The other 1 million went to the private sector that's out there in the market where people can register, farmers can register to apply to become authorized persons, give notifications of intention to vaccinate, and then to go and procure it from the veterinarian offices and inject it into the animals and then give proper reporting back on that. We are also expecting another 2 million vaccines on the 13th of August and another 2 million on the 20th of August. Of that 4 million, government will take 1 million and the private sector will get 3 million. Then I know that RMIS via OBP has also procured another 4 million vaccines that will be coming in. So the rate at which vaccines are coming in now has definitely sped up and sped up. So we are very grateful for that. That helps government to give more attention to areas where we need to go into, to new outbreaks, to make sure that we got vaccines available and that we've got people available to go into those new outbreak areas and not only vaccinate there, but vaccinate as large a portion of a buffer area as possible. Then we've also got to accept the reality that there are farmers that firstly cannot afford to buy this. And secondly, they do not have the facilities. They don't have the proper pens and kraals to really do this. Government must help those people. And the main reason for that is, well, firstly, to protect the cattle. But farmers in an area might procure their own vaccine. And they might all vaccinate and think we are hunky-dory, everything is fine. But if there's one farmer in that area that could not do that, all of the other efforts might be in vain because in 6 months' time, there might be another outbreak. So this is a collective effort. We must go and procure vaccines where we can as commercial farmers, and government will keep on chasing new outbreaks as well as assisting where people cannot afford it or does not have the facilities to properly implement this plan.
So now, when you say the supports and the rollout, there's a veterinary shortage of staff at this point in time. How are you, or how's the department really planning on overcoming that as quickly as possible to keep up with the rollout plan?
If you looked at the bottlenecks in the past, we had procurement that vaccines came in, but the big bottleneck was physically at the application of the vaccine itself. We just simply do not have enough state and private veterinarians or veterinarian technicians in the country to roll it out. And that is why we agreed that we will deem every farmer on application to be an authorized person. Our farmers vaccinate their cattle annually against various diseases. They know how to apply this. So that bottleneck will now be sorted out because the farmer can go, he can procure his vaccine, he can go to his farm and he can apply that without having a veterinarian practitioner or a vet on the farm whilst he's doing that. You can just imagine how that will speed up this whole process because vets can now go into those areas where they really are required. Instead of going to a farm where he's standing by and the farmer stands and they are both looking at each other and two people standing there for one person to do the job. Our farmers can do that. Let them do that.
Yes. So realistically, what are we looking at on a timeline here?
It's very difficult to commit to timelines. Let me give you an idea of the dairy industry. We've got 1,385,000 dairy cattle in the country. They've already received 1.4 million vaccines. So the whole of the country's dairy industry have received their first vaccination. Now we must prioritize a booster vaccination for them. We all saw the effect that foot and mouth disease had on dairy cattle. So that must now be procured. The Milk Producers Organization and myself have had discussions, and I said that we will approve the availability of a second or a booster vaccine to the Milk Producers Organization as a matter of urgency. But they must now go and their members must apply to become authorized people so that we don't have to put in the same resources from a veterinarian side to, again, vaccinate those on a booster shot whilst those farmers can actually do it themselves. They know how to do it. Timeline-wise, I think that what we've implemented now are putting us on track to reach a point where we can safely say that we have vaccinated 80% of the national herd. Up to now, 17 million vaccines came into the country. We've got roughly 15.2 million cattle in the country. So we've got enough vaccines to vaccinate the whole herd. and that must
As
now
a
be
first
implemented
dose.
as a first dose. But then it is extremely important to make sure that those follow-up booster doses come in as soon as possible.
Within that 6 week.
It's not
period.
necessarily a 6 week period. If you look at the prescriptions from the manufacturers, it can be longer. But the bottom line is, if we really want to create herd immunity, we must do that as soon as possible. In certain instances, it might be 6 to 8 weeks. In other instances, where people take longer to procure, it might take longer. But our aim must be that we really get in. We've got 17 million vaccines in now. There's another 8 million in the pipeline to come within the next month. If we can carry on with this, and let's say an 8 million coming in now and another, on average, 2 million per month. I know the one supplier wants to, Dunevax wants to bring in 2 million per month thereafter. I really think that with the 4 months left in this year, we can get to a point where if everybody pulls together, we can get to an 80% double vaccination by the end of this year.
Okay. So then let's talk about OBP. It's been reported that the department has been procuring vaccine doses from OBP at 70 Rand per dose. What is the discrepancy? Why is there a discrepancy?
It's difficult for me to say. I was not here in the beginning when that took place. What I know is that Dunevax lands the vaccine at any veterinary office in the country at 45 Rand a dose. Biogenesis Bago is roughly in the same area, 44, 45 Rand. So what happened in the past is OBP procured vaccines from Dunevax, and Dunevax supplied it to OBP at 45 Rand. But then OBP had to do the delivery and the transport and the cold storage thereof. I think that is stupid. I think OBP must liaise with the supplier. Dunevax is willing to deliver it in any place in the country. So OBP should tell them, please give 3,000 vaccines to the veterinarian in Kuruman. Dunevax will then go and deliver that. OBP does not have to incur that cost. So it's a matter of just organizing things better. So the moment that Dunevax delivered it to OBP, they have fulfilled their mandate of delivering. They cannot be expected to then, on OBP's behalf, go and deliver it. So I think if we can get the communication on delivery better and have a strategy plan in place where Dunevax or Biogenesis Bago can go and deliver at the specific places where they need that, it will really cut a lot of cost.
And then while we're talking about OBP, Minister Steenhuisen was investigating the reported 480 million that has gone missing at OBP. Will you be pursuing that investigation?
Absolutely. It's 492 million. The money was provided to OBP in 2013. In 2021, the project that was supposed to be funded by that was stopped. And there's nothing to be shown for that 492 million rand that was spent. So it needs to be investigated. The SIU is busy investigating it. So I'm not going to elaborate on any findings because I haven't been presented with any report. But I can assure you that they will have the department and my own full support to investigate that. Gary, it's not right that amount of money, and remember this has been provided in 2013. Can you imagine 13 years later what 492 million rand is worth? It's more
Just
than
on
a billion.
interest, yes.
Well, not only interest, just on the devaluation of money. It's far more than R1 billion in today's money that just vanished. We did an inspection there a couple of years ago when I was still on the portfolio committee. And there's a big storeroom and some building material lying there. But there's nothing that works. So it needs to be investigated. We need to get to the core of this so that we can firstly get rid of who was responsible for that mismanagement, and secondly learn out of it so that it never happens again. We are failing South Africans at the moment from OBP's side, and not at the moment, only in the past couple of years, because we are not able to provide vaccines on capacity. A year and a half ago, we had a huge problem with African horse sickness vaccines. OBP should be able to produce that at scale, and they could not because they did not have proper freeze dryers. That has been procured now, it's there, so it really has, there's been a big improvement. Let us put that on the table as well. But to have a situation, for example, where the manufacturer of your freeze dryer tell you in 2016 that this freeze dryer has got a lifespan left of 5 years, and you then do nothing. 5 years later in 2021, the prophecy of the original manufacturer came true. And the machine broke down, the first one. It broke down. It's gone. And still you do nothing. A year and a half later, your second freeze dryer also breaks, and still you've done nothing to maintain those. You are the architect of your own sorrows. And you've got to be really, it's got to be investigated. So from an SIU point of view, the money that's got lost, that needs to be investigated. But from a managerial point of view, we've got to look at who did not make decisions, who did not implement maintenance plans, to make sure that it does not happen again. We've got those freeze dryers in now, we are able to produce at scale, but we want to get to a point, Gary, where we have got a vaccine bank in this country, where we've got enough, not only to provide to ourselves, but to our neighboring countries, to our SADC neighbors, and hopefully throughout the world. We've got these great facilities that we had in the past, and we can definitely get them back to be these brilliant world-class facilities again with regards to biosecurity management.
And if there's any proof of foul play, those people will be accountable.
Absolutely. If people stole money, they must be prosecuted and they must go to jail. We must make an example of anybody that took money out of the hands of farmers. There's no doubt about it. And that is not up to me. That is up to the Director of Public Prosecutions. But first, the SIU report must come out. So let's not jump the gun. Let's see what comes out in that. I do not have insight into that at this moment, but I hope that they will get to the core of what happened here.
So, Minister, let's talk about export and trade. There are several challenges that are prohibiting, and not prohibiting perhaps, but challenging export. Poor infrastructure and failing infrastructure, bottlenecks at various points and ports, trade tariffs, biosecurity challenges. What is your immediate action plan to address all of those? And what would take priority?
You mentioned infrastructure. Let's take table grape farmers, for example. We've got the best quality table grapes that you can get anywhere in the world. I've got no doubt about it. They farm, they do whatever they've got to do to get the right product, harvest it at the right time. Then they've got the challenge, firstly, of transporting that on a road, let's say, for example, from Kakamas, where they do that, and the road infrastructure is not good. They've got infrastructure challenges when it comes to cold chain storage if you don't have a reliable, affordable electricity supply. Let's say all of that happened. Now they get to the harbour and there's bottlenecks at the harbour itself. Those things need to be addressed. I've had discussions with Minister Barbara Creecy, the Minister of Transport, to make sure that, especially with regards to transport, which is a huge chain in this whole value chain of getting things to the markets out there, that we see what can be done to really better that. And I'm very glad to say that Minister Creecy and her team are really trying to see what they can do. Let me give you a proper example. There's a lot of fruit that needs to be exported over our festive season in December. Then people, the harbour is there, depending on wind and weather. That's always got a huge role to play. But then between Christmas and New Year, people don't arrive for work. They've got plans in place to hopefully be able to get over that. So infrastructure is a big thing that we've got to do. You ask about tariffs. I think when we talk about tariffs, we must also speak about AGOA. There's a huge chance that we might lose AGOA and that we might lose a tariff-free market that we had in the past to the United States. Now, firstly, it's very important to try to maintain your current markets that you've got and then build from there and expand markets so that you've got more options of where you're going to move your product, which might give you more options on what the prices are that you're going to get for your products. I'm going to China on the 7th and the 8th of September to sign a protocol on the export of cherries from South Africa to China. We are currently in a position where we know that we will have the largest cherry harvest in the history of this country. So opening up that market will definitely expand the possibilities that our farmers have got for that product. We've seen in the past year and a half, how market access have been expanded by my predecessor. And I really want to thank him very much for that. He did an excellent job at opening up new markets for our exporters. So we've got to maintain what we've got, but we've also got to look reality in the face and say to ourselves, well, there might be risk areas where we might lose markets, and we don't want to be caught with our pants around our knees when that happens. So we will, from our side, do everything in our power. We've got agricultural attachés now in various countries, Belgium, Switzerland, Rome. There's a lot of them there that can help us to start to proactively get those markets ready for us. The more markets you've got, the more options of price, and we need better pricing because we saw what our inset costs are and how they've risen over the last few years. We cannot continue selling our products at the same price but have a huge increase in our inset costs and think that we're going to be profitable. We're not.
So then that negotiation always comes at trade-offs. What challenges do you foresee when addressing all of the trade challenges?
Well, we know that with the United States there are tariff and non-tariff barriers. So there are things on a macro-political level that needs to be addressed, and hopefully we will be able to address that. I have met in my previous portfolio with the ambassador from the United States to South Africa, Ambassador Buzel, and I also met him informally 2 weeks ago, where we on an informal basis discussed these things, and I'm quite sure that both our countries, South Africa and the United States, are really looking towards solutions, towards seeing how we can especially get around the non-trade tariff barriers that might be there. We've got to expand our markets, and we've got to make sure that the people that does that know how to do that. A big problem that we've got at this stage is our biosecurity measures. We cannot export our beef to the whole world because of foot-and-mouth disease. But we can export our beef to countries that does not have cattle. Jordan, for example, is taking our beef. They don't have cattle there. So foot-and-mouth disease and the spreading thereof for them is not an issue. I'm going to speak to every single country that is willing to take beef from us in this place in time, because we know the challenges that our beef cattle farmers are facing by not being able to export. You will have an over availability of meat in the country, which will bring the price down extremely to extreme low levels, where it might be very good for the consumer, but it might not be profitable for the farmer anymore. And profitability for the farmer has got a huge nexus when it comes to food security, because if farmers are not profitable, they cannot produce, and if they can't produce, we won't have food to eat. So we must look at the balance between the profitability for them and protecting them when it comes to export markets. So we will do everything in our power. I know, for an example, Qatar is also a country to whom we can export beef now, but we've got to get those protocols in place. Their former emir passed away. They were in a period of mourning, and in that period of mourning you cannot do trade negotiations. But we will now be at a point where we will start to do that and hopefully be successful in that.
That's great. Minister, so we've accepted that government can't solve every problem, but we do expect policies to be changed or amended to address the current challenges. What can we expect from your department in the next 3 months?
You are 100% correct. There are a number of challenges that we face. But the one thing that I firstly want to make very clear is that going forward, there will be better communication between the department and all the various role players, whether it's agricultural organizations, whether it's the veterinary council. There will be better communication. We saw what happened if communication is not good. This whole foot-and-mouth disease outbreak showed that to us. The other thing that's very important for me is internally in the department to get a culture shift in the minds of people here. people are not only coming to this office or the various agriculture offices across the country because it's their job and they've got to be there. They must go there because it's a calling. They must go there and have the attitude of, I want to go to work today because I want to be of service to the farmers of this country. And that is a thing that I want to implement, the attitude in which the department is taking on its responsibility. In the same regard, and we spoke about that earlier, is to enable those people that must go to work with that attitude to work in an environment where they can be more efficient, to bring in systems, technology that can really help them to do what they're supposed to do, just in a much more efficient way. So there's a huge responsibility in that regard. We've spoken about biosecurity, and we've spoken about market access. That will be clear aims and goals for me to achieve. But then we've also got to admit the problems that we've got with Act 36. How are we going to revive that? We are looking into that. And I can tell you now, Gary, without creating any expectations, because I can't create those expectations, this will take time. It's going to take time to change legislation, to replace old legislation that comes from 1947. I mean, good grief, it's been a lot of time. There's been a lot of changes, a lot of technology and innovation that came in. We've got to make sure that legislation speaks to the times that we are living in now, and we're not traveling with ox wagons anymore. We are farming with John Deere and Massey Ferguson tractors, and we've got to get on with the available technology. So those are the challenges. We will not lie down until they are achieved, and we are looking forward to take hands with the sector, with people in the value chain, not only in the value chain from the farmer to the consumer, but also that very important value chain of what happens before the farmer even plants, where he buys his seed from, the finance that they get. All those things form part of a bigger picture. Without the one value chain, you will not have the second value chain. And if we don't manage all of that together, we will have a crisis with food security. We will have a crisis with rural safety, because our rural areas will become more unsafe if farmers aren't there to farm and to provide jobs and create a macroeconomy in our rural areas. So it's a collaborative way. Government will do everything in our power, and I can promise you, me and my department stand ready to change things around and to really serve agriculture in this country.
So, Minister, thank you for your time. I think we've all accepted that government and the department can't change overnight, and we appreciate the efforts towards change. We look forward to tracking your performance.
Gary, thank you very much, and thank you also for the assistance that we are getting from you and the media to get the message out there. A message of, let's take hands, let's work together. Let's really take the challenges on collectively, because that is the only way in which we will be able to do that. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to my tenure. And I can give you the undertaking, for as long as I am in this seat, I will work day and night, really hard, to the benefit of our farmers. They deserve it.
Thank you, Minister. Farmers, until next time, goodbye.